Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 ASI AGM, or Annual General Meeting. My name is Sasha Courville, and I'm the Independent Chair of the Board of ASI, and I will be guiding everyone through this AGM today. Next slide, please. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are all coming from and pay my respects to elders past and present. I would particularly like to acknowledge any Indigenous people and local community representatives attending here today. I also would like to remind everyone of our antitrust compliance policy and note that a link to this policy was contained in the AGM notice. During this AGM, we will be using Slido, an interactive tool that enables us to ask questions and get feedback quickly. So please do join Slido right now, and we'll be using it for the duration of the AGM. So you can scan the QR code with your phone to join, or you can go to slido.com in your browser and type in the event code that's on the screen, and away we go. Okay, so just give everybody a moment or two to get Slido ready. You see it there. And then we'll kick off with the first warm-up question, which is, what country are you joining us from? So if everybody could just type that in, and we're starting to see some responses. That's great. We'll give it a little bit of time. And the bigger the number shows that the number of people kind of putting the same response in. It's still moving, so we'll give it a little bit more time. But lots of participation from the United Kingdom, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, France, Australia is growing. Brazil. There we go. So we will have a number of Slidos coming. So that was just a bit of a warm-up to get everyone ready, but it looks like we have quite a broad representation from lots of different countries and regions. So that's fantastic. Thank you. Now we might, we're still going. That's okay. It's a warm-up. We have a couple more kind of at the beginning of this, and then they'll be throughout the rest of the AGM. But what we might do is flag a little bit of something special. So this is a special year for ASI in that we're celebrating 10 years of the Aluminium Stewardship Initiative. So to help us remember and get into the mindset around thinking about what we have achieved over the last 10 years, we're just going to watch a short video.
In 2015, 20 organizations came together to start the journey towards responsible production, sourcing, and stewardship of aluminium. Over the past 10 years, this group of leaders has grown to nearly 400 organizations that support our mission for positive change along the aluminium value chain. Our common goal is to address 4 key sustainability priorities facing the sector: climate, aligning sector emissions reduction pathways for a 1.5-degree scenario; circularity, enabling systems change for increasing circular economies; nature, delivering nature-positive outcomes; and human rights, supporting affected Indigenous peoples and local communities to be resilient and thrive. After a decade of effort to build and scale ASI's program across the aluminium value chain, we have laid some important foundations. But with sustainability challenges growing ever more urgent, much work still lies ahead. No one can solve climate, circularity, nature, or human rights challenges alone. ASI's multi-stakeholder governance, whole-of-supply chain approach, and record of driving change is making a difference. And to you, our committed members, thank you for your support and sustainability actions over 10 years of ASI. As we mark our 10-year milestone, we're producing a special video series to share key moments, aspects, and achievements of ASI's journey and describe what lies ahead. Here are the first videos of the series, with more yet to come each month throughout the year.
At ASI, we believe that non-conformances create valuable opportunities. Our view is that it's better to set a higher ambition and risk falling short than to just create standards around business as usual. Independent third-party audits bring a fresh perspective to a company's practices. And while no one likes to discover gaps in their performance, knowing where improvements are needed against an international standard and relative to a growing number of peers builds the case for change, and it drives real impact.
Fantastic. That's wonderful to just get a sense of everything that we've been through and achieved over those 10 years. So another Slido question for everyone. You can see it. How many years have you been involved in ASI? We have a sense that there's probably going to be quite a diversity of responses. So let's see. So that you can see that there's a few different options. So just pick kind of the category that fits for you. And accessing Slido, there's two ways. Either you take your phone and direct the camera to the QR code, and that will take you directly to Slido, or go slido.com and then put in the event code, which is on the screen. No worries. Okay, so let's see what the responses are. We're still going. Can we scroll down? Is it possible to scroll that down a little bit on the screen so that we can see the numbers? So 1 to 3 is a lot, and 10 years plus is about 25%. 1 to 3 years, 40%. That's wow. So we have kind of bookends really in terms of a lot of fresh faces and new participation, which is wonderful. But we also have a lot of people that have been engaged in ASI from the very beginning. So that's absolutely fantastic. So we'll have to kind of trigger some memories for those 10 years. And for the people who are 1 to 3, we'll have to think kind of the next 10 years, where will we be? Thank you. So we might move into the kind of the formal part of the agenda. You can see on this screen that this is our agenda that we'll go through. And in total, this AGM will be about 90 minutes. And during the AGM, members will have the opportunity to ask questions or comment on the items of business that have been tabled in the meeting notice. We would love to hear from you. That's one of the key objectives of the AGM, is to get feedback and to answer questions. So please be ready with them. There are, if you want to ask a question, and there'll be 2 interactive sessions. There'll be a board Q&A panel, and there'll be a Secretariat panel as well towards the end of the AGM. Please use the Q&A box to ask questions. Now, if you're listening on our translations channel and you want to ask questions in French or Chinese, an ASI team member will translate this into English for us via an attached comment. So we will be able to respond to your comments or questions also in French and Chinese. Okay. So, and you'll see that we have quite a lot going on. As per last year, you will be able to see the questions being asked. So you'll see all the questions in that Q&A function, and you can upvote them. So you can like them, and they'll go higher up in the order of the list. So if there's questions that you don't want to ask, but you see somebody and you like that question, you can upvote it. And you can also comment on questions. You can put your name in, or you can ask questions anonymously, whatever you prefer. Now, if you are having technical challenges and you need IT support, we do have IT support on this call who can offer advice. Now, if you are experiencing technical issues, send a message in the chat function. Okay, so if you want to ask questions of the content and ASI, then you use the Q&A function. If you want to ask technical questions of how to do something, use the chat function. Okay. So the first order of business for the AGM is to acknowledge elected directors for 2025. As you know, ASI has a multi-stakeholder governance structure. And so at the board, there are 2 representatives from the production and transformation class, 2 from industrial users, and 2 from civil society, plus 2 independents, for a total of 8. Directors serve 2-year terms on a rotating basis, so nominations and elections by members are held every year. This year, we welcome Renee Klopper, newly elected, and we welcome back Catherine Aten, re-elected for another term. They join our continuing directors, Salman, Julia, Jan, and Gerald, and independent directors, Raj and myself. Congratulations also to Anders Blom, who has been appointed to the board's Governance and People Committee. And I would also like to thank Matthias Esdar for his service to the ASI board until April this year. His contributions to ASI's governance have been greatly appreciated. We also would like to acknowledge the Standards Committee elected last year. We are grateful for the diverse participation across the value chain and from civil society and IPAF, the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Forum, supporting the integrity of our multi-stakeholder governance. We're currently running a nomination process for industrial users for a casual vacancy and an anticipated retirement later this year. Thanks to Alexander Lutweiler from Nespresso and Judith Pichman from Ronald Group for their service to the committee. Now, with the standards revision launched in March, this committee is very hard at work, dealing with both the big picture of how you drive change, as well as the fine detail of translating that into normative requirements and implementation guidance. A big thanks for the time and efforts of these committee members on behalf of the entire ASI membership. Beyond the committee, the contributions of many working group participants on important thematic theme topics will be informing the standards revision process in a meaningful way. So I'd also like to thank you for your time, energy, insights, and commitment. Initiatives like ASI can only thrive and drive change through the active participation of its members. The second item of business for the AGM relates to ASI's financial performance. A signed copy of ASI's financial statements and director's report, along with the director's declaration and the independent auditor report, was emailed to members with the notice of this AGM. Now, in accordance with Australian law, it is not necessary for members to vote on or otherwise approve these statements. They were circulated in advance of this meeting to give members an opportunity to review and consider them, and to be able to raise any concerns, questions, or comments at the AGM, as is good practice. Seeing right now reproduces the statement of profit or loss contained in the circulated financial statements for 2024. To give some context, ASI had operating surpluses in 2020, 2021, and 2022. To invest these surpluses in value-add activities for members, ASI planned deficits in 2023 and particularly 2024. If we go to the next slide. Now, the 2024 deficit was on budget, but it was achieved by constraining expenditure in the light of less than anticipated revenue growth. This has meant constraining expenditure in the 2025 budget as well, particularly travel, still with a planned deficit for the year. Through 2025 as a consolidation year on the finance side, ASI continues to deliver services and results to its members and broader stakeholders. And despite the current economic environment, we are a strong and growing vehicle for change. We're going to the next slide. And instead of just hearing me speak all the time, I'm going to invite Fiona to join me for a little bit of discussion so we get more color into the finance slides. So thanks, Fiona. Now, this chart shows the growth in ASI's expenditure over the last 6 years and the 2025 budgeted growth. Now, over 70% of ASI's expenditure goes towards the Secretariat. And over the last 2 years, ASI has invested in growing our Secretariat numbers and capability to meet current and future membership demand and support the implementation of our strategy. With a slowdown in our membership growth, and the budget for 2025 is much more contained, with no increase in Secretariat and reduced travel and governance. Fiona, would you maybe be able to tell us a little bit about the size and shape of the Secretariat right now?
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. And we can see that year-on-year Secretariat growth in the yellow part of the chart. So last year we grew the team with 6 new colleagues in standards, assurance, and operational roles. And these were to prepare us for some growing work streams, including the standards revision. We now have a team of 35 who are globally distributed and working very hard on program delivery for a still growing membership.
Thank you. And we can also see the red lines, the project expenditure growing over time. Would you be able to give us a little bit of a flavor for that?
Yeah, so you can see that it's grown this year, particularly in the 2025 budget. And that's because we were successful in winning 2 externally funded innovation grants. So this year we've got 2 new projects that are focused on capacity building with stakeholders. One is on bauxite mining rehabilitation with Indigenous peoples and local communities. And the other one is working with waste pickers on the scrap supply side.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you. And as flagged, travel is constrained this year. And so from a board perspective, what that means for us is that we're not having our one in-person board strategy session a year. What we're doing instead is we'll have a series of 4 online workshops to be able to work through the strategy and review that. Fiona, can you tell us what it means for the Secretariat?
Yeah, so we certainly tightened our travel budgets for 2025, as you can see that green bit in the chart. So for the Secretariat, like for the board, that's meant that our annual in-person sessions were also put on hold, and we pared back our general travel for this year. So we're certainly going to be relying on our COVID era skills for the team's online collaboration and engagement sessions, similar to the board.
Thank you. And any final thoughts on where we are in terms of the maturity of ASI as an organization 10 years on?
So I'd say we're still maintaining a disciplined level of operational investment. That bit in blue, we've kept that pretty steady. So at 10 years, I'd say we're still a pretty lean organisation that's delivering a full suite of activities and services. So both of those operational and secretariat spends and making sure that we keep those proportional to member growth are going to be critical to the program quality and integrity.
Thank you. And next slide, please. So well, if we look to the 2026 finance outlook, there are 3 main variables that impact ASI's finances and therefore our budget planning. The global economic outlook, which is uncertain, foreign exchange volatility, which does impact us, and membership growth and retention. Of these, the third is the only one that is within our ability to shape. So membership fees are around 93% of our revenue, and it's something the board reviews on an annual basis, with the last membership fee increases in 2020 and 2024. We don't raise fees lightly, but given the economic environment, for us to be able to deliver on member value and provide a comprehensive standard system to drive performance and impact, we need sufficient revenue. So we have asked the Secretariat to do some research and come back to us with options. The Finance, Audit, and Risk Committee will be reviewing these options shortly, and the board will decide on their recommendation at our next meeting on the 23rd of June. We will advise all members by the end of June to give 6 months notice before the effective date of any membership fee increases by the 1st of January 2026. Fiona, would you be able to share a little bit about what an increase in fees would enable us to deliver?
Yeah, so as you say, Sasha, membership fees are the majority of ASI's revenue, so they fundamentally support the core work that we can do. So having an increase in fees for 2026 is going to allow us to keep up with the inflationary pressures on our operating costs and better resource the delivery of our strategy to meet member needs. And that's going to include, for example, a higher level of in-person engagement and outreach than we've been able to budget for this year, as we just talked about.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So in the last strategy review in September 2024, when the board got together in person for the last time, we took stock of the landscape, including a number of risks and opportunities. So if we could bring those up on screen, that'd be great. And we undertook some deep dives on a number of those key risk areas, including the role of voluntary standard systems in a period of rising ESG regulation. Now, recognizing backlash in some areas, the fact still remains that we're now facing unprecedented sustainability-related regulation in many parts of the world, particularly on climate disclosures. Even with a backlash, this is going to be hard to dismantle. So I think we're in a situation of increasing sustainability regulation over the short, medium, and long term. Noting that standard systems were largely developed in a regulatory vacuum, especially across international trade, it's important for us to review the role that we play in this new operating environment. So how do we drive improved performance beyond regulation? How do we align with regulation and add value from a compliance, risk management, and strategy perspective? We've also heard from a number of members about the importance of credible sustainability claims in a market that is saturated with claims, but also increasingly skeptical of greenwashing. And we're working through our role here as well. But as always, where there are risks, there are also opportunities. So Fiona, would you be able to share your reflections on an opportunity or two that was covered in our strategy refresh process?
Yes, thanks, Sasha. It feels like every year the broader environment for our work gets more volatile. So I think being agile is really important. And so we need strategies that position us for really many possible future scenarios. So two opportunities I would pick out, and Riley, we might just go back to the slide before because we're still talking about those. That's it. I think I'd pick out the digital investment one, continuing to lean into that. And that's in line with the broader tech transformations like AI that are going to affect all industries. So our digital work is going to enable us to support scale and cost-effective processes for members. And then secondly, in a world where we see growing levels of distrust, our beyond certification investment aims to create that local level of impact and insights, including through ASI's Indigenous Peoples Advisory Forum or IPAF. These kinds of relationships of what going to be will help us to target our efforts towards the kind of meaningful change that we want to see.
Thank you. And next slide. So if we look at the context of those risks and opportunities that we've just flagged, we refreshed our strategy and our theory of change for the next 3 years, so 2025 to 2027, focusing on 3 medium-term outcomes that we want to achieve by 2030. So we won't get there all the way during this 3-year strategy, but we need to make progress towards them. And so really what we flagged is that by 2030, we want to create a critical mass for sector change at scale. And that's through supply chain and investment sector engagement, among others. We want to ensure accessibility of relevant data and metrics that can evidence change and the gaps we're facing for delivering on long-term goals. So creating the data, the evidence base, to underpin the integrity of the standard and the system is fundamental. And lastly, we want to evolve the ASI standards to be able to continue to respond effectively to changing member and stakeholder needs. And those drive down to 6 strategic focus areas that will help us get to those medium-term outcomes. Fiona, would you be able to provide a little bit more context for those 6 strategic areas?
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. So under that critical mass piece, we're really focusing on engagement and outreach. So that's downstream, particularly through the flat roll product customer segments. We're continuing our engagement in China. They're a major producer and user of aluminium, as we all know. And we're working in high impact regions. So Guinea, Brazil, India, Indonesia are regions that we believe we can make a real difference for the aluminium value chain. In the data column, we're focusing on some important digital projects, including the Elemental 2.0 rebuild, and we'll see a demo on that shortly, as well as the greenhouse gas methods work. So building on the decarbonisation pathways and looking at potential opportunities for carbon-related claims in future. And finally, of course, the standards revision. This is a really major project, brings in the whole ASI team, and it's relevant for all of our multi-stakeholder membership. As you said, we kicked that off in March, and we're working towards the 2027 version of the standards as part of our regular 5-year update cycle.
Thank you. And now another Slido, so get your phone out. If you haven't already joined, please do. We're interested in hearing, kind of given our strategy discussion, is what is your #1 strategic concern about aluminium and sustainability? So just get it ready and put the first thing that comes to mind. You don't have to think too much about it. We're not going to quiz you. We just want to know what's top of mind in terms of your concerns about aluminium and sustainability. Few people are typing.
Interesting. Yeah. Good, we've got 2 spellings of decarbonisation.
We do. There we go. Oh, okay. So we'll give a little bit more time. Go. All right. So clearly, decarbonization and circularity are really big topics, but there is a lot. Geopolitical concerns, companies greenwashing, traceability and supply chain, carbon footprint, low energy technology, scrap mining. So there's a lot, but I think we could, and I know what we will do is take the insights and do more analysis on them to help guide our work so that all this input will capture and make really good use of. But there's a lot of key themes coming out. A couple of people are continuing to type. And I'll ask the board members to look at this because it will be a question that I will ask my fellow board members shortly in the board Q&A panel discussion. So we still, I mean, if you put the different spellings of decarbonization together, that would be big, plus circularity, plus low energy technology. But there's a lot of topics that are people's #1 concern strategically about aluminium and sustainability. So thank you, everyone. We will come back to this slide, and board members, please do some reflections. We're now going to go into the board strategy Q&A. If all board members could turn their cameras on, that would be fantastic. And if you have a particular board member you want to ask a question of, then please flag that. Otherwise, I'll open it up to the full board, and people can answer the questions that they feel most prepared or able to be able to respond, depending upon where they come from. As I flagged, our board membership is diverse and represents the membership of ASI as well. And if you have questions, please do put them in the Q&A function of so let's go to the Q&A, and we do have something. All right. So we do have one question to start with is I missed a comparison between the budget and the expenses of 2024. So for that one, I might actually hand to Jan, who's the chair of our Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, to provide a little bit more detail on that.
Yeah, the budget wasn't mentioned there. Good morning, evening, good afternoon, everybody. The budget wasn't there, but at the end of the day, and it was already mentioned, we were able, by changing our policy with regards to traveling costs to more or less arrive at the budgeted deficit at the end of the year. So the differences were minor compared to budget in the end of the day. But for the Finance and Audit Review Committee, obviously the situation was challenging enough to really start monitoring the financial results of ASI on a more monthly basis. And well, the good news is obviously, as you've seen as well, that the reserves position, the cash reserves position remained intact. So there is a strong cushion for ASI. At the same time, we see the organization changing its activities to ensure that financial results are being maintained. But obviously, in the long run, we have to give it some further thought.
Thanks, Jan. And we have another question from Anna-Marie Goodmakers. Why is the percentage of staff filling in the governance survey so low compared to other groups in ASI? Are staff afraid to comment? I did ask the same question when we were initially looking at the results, but I might hand to Fiona to respond to that.
Yeah, thanks, Sasha, and thanks, Anne-Marie. We did have a smaller percentage of staff filling out the governance survey, but part of the reason I think is that we also have our performance reviews in December at the time when this survey was sent out. So I think there can be a sense of a lot of discussion and a lot of feedback that's happening already through those cycles. So it's something that we encourage, and we've had some reflections on internally. We've done a session on feedback that we've received through the survey. So we'll be looking again to this year to encourage that as a channel.
Thanks, Fiona. We have another question, so keep the questions coming. That's fantastic. This one is, ASI is an inclusive upstream and downstream organization. What's ASI's risk-based approach and activities on the upstream activities? Who would like to respond to that one first?
I can start if you like, and then others can come in. So I guess there's a wide variety of ways that we're trying to take a risk-based approach looking at upstream. And we gave some examples earlier of some of the projects that we're working on through IPAF, through our Indigenous Peoples Advisory Forum, and through some of the capacity building work that we've been doing on things like complaints mechanisms, on practices around human rights and impact assessments and so on around major development projects that are upstream. We're also through the standards revision, and we can talk some more about this in the Secretariat part of the discussion too, having a look at materiality. And we are, through the Standards Committee discussion, certainly seeing that and I think this was one of the answers in the Slido as well, that say mining, but also alumina refining, aluminium smelting, a kind of larger impact related activities. And so there are currently in the performance standard and will continue to be aspects that focus on those particularly. From the assurance side, we also do for any new certification for these upstream activities, we do a pre-audit risk review, make sure that audit plans and audit teams are appropriate for those risks, have the right kinds of skills to assess the risks and issues that are present with that particular site or location. So there's a range of things that we're doing in that space.
Thanks, Fiona. Does anybody else want to add to Fiona's response? Catherine, I think you need to turn yourself on from a sound perspective.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Yes, maybe since this is the board panel, maybe at the board level, it is clear that we look at a lot of the upstream topics. We've had very specific discussions with IPAF. We've had very specific discussions on the biodiversity and on the mining activities. So it's not 100% dedicated to that because it's a value chain approach, but we do spend some time, significant time on those topics a bit more and in the strategy part of our discussions.
Thank you, Catherine. We have another question from Anne-Marie about, did biodiversity turn up in the Slido? So I'm wondering if we could bring the Slido slide around the various different number one strategic concerns about aluminium and sustainability back up, if that's possible, to then be able to ask for reflections from board members on what do you take away from those issues in term. Thank you, that's brilliant. So what are your reflections on that list or those various different kind of bits of input in terms of member priority concerns on aluminium and sustainability? Whoever would like to start. And then we can also look at the same time, biodiversity. It is there. It's just not huge.
Yes, Sasha, Gerald here, I can happy to comment on that. Hello, everybody. I think obviously here we see a big priority, let's say, on decarbonization, circularity, recycling. From my point of view, I would also give the emphasis to decarbonization and circularity, but that doesn't mean that then biodiversity as well as social impacts are not a priority. You know, personally, I see even human rights, biodiversity included in the nature pillar almost as like good housekeeping. You know, that basically has to be in place. It's almost like compliance versus then decarbonization, circularity. We are talking about different performance and value on the market, what then maybe the downstream users are valuing. So I think one might have to look at this more from a perspective, okay, this absolutely needs to be in place. It's kind of the license to operate. And then decarbonization, circularity is kind of the license to sell or to sell better. That's how I would interpret that.
Thank you, Gerald. Other reflections on what you're seeing on the screen?
I can go, Sasha. I think
Thank you, Julia.
what is interesting is that the issues are not new, right? And the concerns, I think, are the same. What is interesting to reflect on is the lenses through which we're seeing this today. I think if this was 12 months ago, we would be interpreting all these issues in a very different lens. But as the world is, I think the biggest concern, at least for me, is the context and how and the tools and the approaches that we have to deal with those issues. And I think there is a lot of uncertainty. So how do we address and get to circularity? How do we look at human rights in the context of complete backlash? So I don't know where we're going to be in 6 months' time, but definitely for me, the biggest concern is the overall context and the uncertainty that is surrounding us.
Thank you, Julia. Any other thoughts or reflections on the slide?
Well, I might just add to that. Thank you, everybody. It's Raj Asirvatham here. I might just add to that the word cloud that we see there does have different emphases depending on where you are in the supply chain. And so particularly in mining, where the footprint is larger, land issues are greater, access to land, human rights, the use of water, and particularly the tailings and the waste disposal, waste management, have a much heavier footprint, if you like, at that end of the business. And then as we move into smelting, obviously decarbonization takes a very large role because of the energy intensive activity. I guess what I'd like to emphasize is that particularly with the advent of the greater use of AI, I'm hopeful that the issue of circularity will start to take on some practical dimensions as the engineering required post smelting to define what circularity looks like in the aluminium market becomes more prevalent and usable in the next few years. So that would be my reflection on that word cloud, is a little bit of sectioning through the value chain.
Thank you, Raj. A reflection that I had when listening to Gerald's response was also, I think there's slightly different time horizons for different issues. And while it may well be the case that biodiversity and ecosystem services may be kind of the foundation or compliance issues kind of in large part in many areas, over time, especially given the financial sector interest in nature with the task force on nature-related financial disclosures coming, it will increasingly be something that will be looked at throughout the entire value chain, and it will be perhaps a point of differentiation. It'll be demanded in markets. So, but it's a timing or a phasing of the maturity of the issue. And I think that's a really critical one. I know that it's a topic for the Standards Committee to review, given the changing landscape on nature and biodiversity. And I think we can see, I mean, another issue that will rise, but will take a while to rise, and it's a really challenging one, but around issues of human rights and inequality. And it's one that we're starting to see it permeate in the financial sector, but it will take a while to come through in terms of the maturity of the issue. In terms, unless there's another board member that has a burning desire to respond to this particular question, we might keep going. We do have a question on, will ASI revise its prerequisite standards for certification, taking CBAM into account? I might preface this by flagging that the board is the strategy and governance vehicle, and the Standards Committee is the part of our governance structure that oversees and manages the standards revision process. But I don't know, Fiona, if it's something you would like to touch on.
I think we might save that for the Secretariat panel, so we'll keep it in there, and I might ask Chris to respond to that a bit later.
Right. We also have another question that I believe has been translated from Wen. Thank you. The membership fee for ASI is tax exempt, but since ASI does not have an office in China, taxes are still required to be paid in addition to the membership fee. Have you considered establishing an office in China? And the short answer to that is yes, we have considered opening an office in China. There are some challenges around the ability to establish an office in China. Fiona, I don't know if you'd like to speak a little bit to this one.
Yeah, so we've certainly been exploring options in this direction. I don't know if it would affect the membership fee side of things, or whether we would still, there's a lot of dimensions to the way in which a representative office would be established. So we're exploring those. It's been a long journey, and we'll definitely keep members in China posted as that progresses.
Thank you. I think we've got to the end of all the questions. Unless anybody has a burning question, please add it, and we will. So please, we'll keep this open for another minute or two if you have a question to the board. Otherwise, I might have a go with a question around, what are you seeing in terms of, given we see a lot of global headwinds that companies are facing all over the world, what does sustainability leadership look like today? Anybody who would like to respond?
I'll have a go.
Thank you, Catherine.
In my view, and we see some backlashes today on the sustainability for, I would say, good and bad reasons. So to speak, good would be that there are some financial issues in some of our markets, in the aluminium markets, where we see our customers are suffering. And therefore, our priority is also to support our customers and make sure that we continue to work with them and continue to expand in their areas and help them. So therefore, priorities may be changing. But what's important is that there is somehow a course that continues, because that's also wished by the whole value chain, and it's demanded anyway by the situation of the climate, typically, and also some other issues, the biodiversity issue. So we need to keep that course, and what's important is to continue to work on it. And maybe communication may not be that important, and may actually be needed in some jurisdictions to be a little bit more quiet. But what's really important is that we continue to work on it, and we continue to push this agenda in our industry. So that I would see as a leadership, whether we are on the upstream, middle stream, or downstream part of this of the value chain.
Thank you, Catherine. I will ask one more question to the full board. Oh, Jan, you wanted to jump in and answer that one too.
Yes, I would like to add there is a lot of pressure in many industries on their sustainability activities. At least that's what I notice around me. And I think sustainability leadership means that you focus your program, but you make it so strong that you still are able to get enough people following you, doing your policy. And I think so it's also an opportunity to me. It's an opportunity to do the best you can within the overall flavor of sustainability. And that's something which at least I want to progress in the areas where I'm active.
Thank you. And Gerald, you have your hand up too. If you wanted to weave in the last question I was going to ask, but we are running out of time, so you can choose which one you want to answer, was really, we're talking a lot about kind of uncertain economic environment, headwinds facing the work we're doing, but quite often there's also opportunities there too. So what are you seeing in terms of opportunities? Feel free to answer either question.
Yeah, honestly, thanks. I think it's quite connected. I know, we are all faced with a lot of uncertainties, volatility, but in the end, I think it's an opportunity to focus, like on the one hand, to stay the course and focus on the things that matter and that make an impact. I think, honestly, in the last years, there have been also developments in sustainability where when you talk to some consultants, it's all about reporting. And for me, like a sustainability professional leader should maybe deal 10% of the time on reporting and really focus on the impact. So reporting should be kind of an outcome. I think it's obviously also quite important. But I think there's an opportunity, like in the last year, I really feel that went overboard. And if I just take CSRD, for instance, we started that journey before it was, let's say, now a little bit put on hold and will be simplified. If you look at CSRD and climate change, it's completely academic. And I have to say, I worked 30 years in sustainability. I didn't understand the questions. So for me, maybe I'm arrogant, but that was proof that they simply do not make sense. And, other people feel the same. So I think really focus on the impacts, focus on the essentials, and I think that will drive progress for the industry.
Thank you. And Salman has been very patient, so I'll give the last word to Salman before we wrap up the board panel.
Thank you, Sasha. On the opportunities, looking from ASI perspective, there's always economical or legislative or environmental reason for the business leaders to invest in certain regions. On the word cloud, we saw CBAM. There was another question around the CBAM, or there's a prerequisite. We know the legislative framework or the trade policies within the US are changing, but there are certain opportunities which presents. Number one, if ASI membership moves into those areas, for example, in the US, we go along with the ASI GHG toolkit. This is a prerequisite. If you want to be a member, you will have to follow the GHG tracker tool, and it brings value to the region wherever ASI members go. It also means the production moves closer to consumption. So it also means that the transportation related carbon footprint, there might be other supply chain related issues, but transportation of the final product going to the consumer is improved. So those opportunities should be looked into. And especially from the ASI perspective, I think wherever ASI members will be, they bring value because of the structured ESG format. And to my personal, what I really like is the GHG tracker tools.
Thank you very much, Salman. And thank you to everyone for your questions and for the engagement from the board. Lots of engagement. We've gone a little bit over time, so I'm going to hand immediately to Fiona for the CEO report. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sasha. I hadn't unmuted myself. So while I often share charts and data in our AGMs, this year I wanted to pull back a bit and reflect on our strengths as an initiative and the value we aim to provide to you as ASI members. So we started our ASI journey in 2015, basically with the mission that we still have to drive positive change in the global aluminium value chain. So we've now got 10 years of collective effort together. And in that time, we've been able to scale to nearly 400 members and over 900 certified entities. And that's far more than any comparable industrial metals sector initiative. We've been strengthening our standards through now 2 multi-stakeholder consensus processes so far, and we have the third one underway. We've built and operationalized Elemental, which was the first digital assurance platform for the metals sector. We can demonstrate that we're improving practices through members closing their non-conformance gaps. So thanks to Nat for her little cameo at the start there. And we're now active across 65 countries through both certification uptake and IPAF engagement, so engagement with our Indigenous Peoples Advisory Forum. But we do live in challenging times. We're aiming for this global sectoral change, but we also need to recognise that there's some local context and there's specific drivers for individual members and stakeholders. We want to see collective action and a sense of shared responsibility to really make a difference on global sustainability issues like climate, nature, circularity, and human rights. But we also recognise that companies are increasingly driven more by a sense of individual value and benefit. We can all see that the pathways for sustainability change aren't linear, and decarbonisation is a really clear example of that. So we need to keep our eye on both the long-term and big picture goals that we're working towards, while also making room for that short-term or incremental progress. And finally, building trust, consensus, and credibility is really key for ASI's work. So as a sustainability initiative, we need to continue to engage widely and keep listening while we navigate this evolving landscape that we're all in. So through that, we're working to try and deliver value at both an individual and a sectoral level. Individual benefits to members, we believe, include supporting your sustainability journey through our standards and certification, and things like providing access to information and metrics about the supply chain through published audit reports and other analyses that we develop. On the supply chain wide side, our goals include enhancing overall transparency and risk mitigation in aluminium supply chains at that sectoral level, and contributing to collaborations and harmonisation efforts to develop common approaches to avoid duplication and to try and create more impact together. So multi-stakeholder governance is central to ASI's work, and each year for the last 9 years, we've conducted a governance survey of the board, of the Standards Committee and all members, also of the Secretariat, as was pointed out. So thanks again to those of you who take the time each year to provide feedback to us. The board does review that feedback in detail, and we use it to agree priority actions for the year ahead. And we shared a summary of the survey results with the AGM notice. Overall, we had good feedback again on the board and Standards Committee's work, as well as ASI's regular communications. And as always, we had some really good ideas for improvement opportunities, which we always appreciate. For the standards revision and elemental projects in particular, what we hear from you is that you want us to, wherever we can, try and reduce complexity, develop better guidance to support implementation and improvements, and to give more regular updates on what's happening. So, for example, progress in the working groups that have just kicked off in recent weeks. So these are all on our to-do list. We also want to make sure that you as members get value from our work. So here's 5 ways that you can maximise your ASI membership. You can work with us on outreach and building further understanding of ASI and the supply chain. So that can be through our flat roll product sector engagement work that we're kicking off, as well as participating in regional projects. We really invite you to share your sustainability stories with us. One of the things that came through in the governance survey is that many members are keen to be inspired by their peers. So sharing your journey can seed broader uptake of good practices. We want you to contribute to the directions that we take, for example, in the standards revision. The working groups are underway, the standards committee is working hard, but we'll also be seeking further feedback through broader consultation opportunities. So keep an eye out for those coming up this year and next. You can access learning through educational and through our regular webinars, and these can help you build internal capacity in your organisation. And of course, if you have resources that you've developed internally or any topic ideas to share with us, please do. We really welcome that. And finally, use the logo. It's a really simple thing, but it can promote your participation in ASI and our broader goals at the same time. So I want to say a big thanks on behalf of the team and the board for your continued membership and support of ASI. It really enables our shared success for this very important sector. So we're moving to another Slido now, which is asking, what do you value most from ASI membership? You can choose more than one option here. You can choose them all if you like, if they're all valuable to you. The options that we have are our standards and certification program. ASI is a tool for supply chain due diligence, the learning, capacity building and improvement opportunities, the multi-stakeholder opportunities, the dialogues that we have through the various governance groups that we put in place, and data and research, some of the analyses that we share, and again, ideas for that welcome as well. And finally, the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Forum and our Beyond certification projects. I touched on a couple of those, and there hopefully are some people that have been involved that are on the call as well. So this is a longer one, so it's hard to kind of see what's coming up and down. Interesting that supply chain due diligence is one of the one that pops up there. Often these things are a little bit interrelated as well. So the certifications, for example, can inform the supply chain due diligence, the kinds of issues that people want to understand risks and respond to risks can be subjects of the learning and capacity building, for example. And of course, we set our standards through multi-stakeholder processes. So these are not necessarily discrete things. They're often very interrelated, and the outcomes that we can build from them rely on that, on the dialogue between each of these aspects, I think. So that's great. Thank you very much for those. We will reflect on that as we go through. So we'll go to the next slide. And it's a good segue, I think, to thank those who actually make all of those activities happen. So the ASI team, we're globally distributed and we work collaboratively within and across all of those work streams, and also behind the scenes to keep all those programs flowing smoothly. And I am incredibly proud of this wonderful team and to thank each and every one for their dedication to ASI and all the work they do in supporting you and your work as members. So we're going to move now to a pre-recorded demo video on the current development of Elemental 2.0, which is going to be our next generation assurance platform for ASI certification. So over to you, Riley, to kick that off.
ASI is continuing its commitment to innovative and effective digital solutions. Elemental 2.0 is a major project for us, aimed at improving the system that underpins the entire ASI certification workflow. Over the years, we've gathered member and auditor feedback on the Elemental platform, including through certification and governance surveys, as well as ad hoc ideas and requests from members. Our new system builds on the foundations of the existing Elemental platform, but with major improvements across the board. Our goals centre around moving away from the current NAC software platform, which has limited our ability to develop and innovate, and keeping the existing functionality while also adding new features and improvements. The current Elemental system is built on a software platform called NAC, the limitations of which mean that implementing and maintaining our assurance platform often requires complex workarounds. This has meant that issues with data submission speed, system availability, and uptime have not been in our control. And when NAC has pushed out software updates, they're often not fully tested and they break our workflows, resulting in painful delays for members, auditors, and the ASI Secretariat. So, we're building Elemental 2.0 from the ground up. we are restructuring and optimizing our entire assurance database while leveraging modern cloud systems and infrastructure. This centralized, bespoke platform will allow for continued optimization into the future, delivered by the ASI Secretariat. What does that mean for you? You'll enjoy a much more responsive interface and a lot less waiting around. And if you do have to wait for something, you'll know exactly what it is. The platform will also be much more reliable, as we'll be able to proactively monitor and investigate any potential issues directly. Elemental does not currently allow you to initiate subsequent self-assessments. Due to some limitations in NAC, ASI has to do this for you. With almost 400 members, this takes up a lot of time for the Secretariat, not to mention the inconvenience to Elemental users. This is a priority feature improvement for the new version. In Elemental 2.0, the power will be in your hands. More control and functionality means quicker progress on your certification journey. The current interface for editing self-assessments can be a bit overwhelming. We've also heard your feedback. It takes too many clicks to get where you need to go. Our goal is to make the interface more efficient and intuitive. We've improved the layout of this page, and we're introducing a new card view, which provides a streamlined way to see the status of your self-assessment. You can always return to the classic view if you prefer the look and feel of the original platform. Currently, when uploading evidence files, they're associated with a single self-assessment. This can result in uploading the same file across multiple self-assessments, a time-consuming process, potentially causing issues with file versions. The new evidence file library is centralized to the member's account, so you'll only need to upload a file once to be able to access it for multiple self-assessments. You can organize the library into folders, for example, corporate and sides, or organized by topics. You can upload multiple files at once, and you can see the exact date that a file was uploaded throughout your certification process. This will make it much easier to manage the files that you choose to upload and easier to find documents related to an individual criteria. Currently, ASI certificates are time-consuming to create and manage, requiring manual updates and revisions as a part of the oversight process. With the launch of Elemental 2, we will begin to issue digital certificates. These certificates will be generated dynamically and automatically, with the latest information drawn directly from the Elemental database. Digital certificates will also be able to be exported into PDF by the user. This will enhance access, save time, and maintain the source of truth within the Elemental database, laying the foundations for improved aggregation and searchability of published Elemental data for all stakeholders. This is a big project that we've been working hard on, and we still have more to do. The ASI Secretariat is working collaboratively and effectively, while continuing to run the existing Elemental 1.0. Internal testing for Elemental 2.0 will begin soon, with a view to release the platform in Q4 2025. If any members are interested in helping with beta testing or feedback, please let us know by emailing elemental@aluminiumstewardship.org. There will be more comms as we get closer to the launch. You can stay up to date by following us on LinkedIn, subscribing to our mailing lists, and keeping an eye on our website.
Thank you, Riley. And that video just highlighted our top 5 feature improvements for the member dashboard. We didn't have time to cover everything that's in the works, but we'd still like to hear from you about whether you have some other feature priorities for Elemental 2.0. This will show as a word cloud for now, but we'll also analyze the information after the session. So feel free to share thoughts in detail so that we can take those forward. We're also aware that not everybody is having access to Slido at the moment. So particularly for this question around Elemental, forward any suggestions or requests to that elemental@aluminiumstewardship.org email address. That would be great. So we have some people typing. we're certainly working hard, as is noted, on this project. We have the existing platform that we're still running at the Elemental 1.0 on NAC, and so we have Carolyn Tiani on that team, and then we also have Bo and Julian working on the back end and the front end, respectively, of the new program, with a combined team effort to iterate, making sure that we're carrying across what we already have. So some of the suggestions here are, might have been splitting to work, but supply chain visibility, the ability to easily create additional users perhaps, and additional accounts, a complete database of ASI certified assets. Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that we're going to be building on top of Elemental 2.0 is a new certifications dashboard or microsite that enables much better searching. As everyone's aware, we currently generate audit reports at the end of the system as PDFs, and so the searchability and database level access is not really there, not only for members and stakeholders, but also for the Secretariat. It's more complex to access the data than we would like. So these are some things that are going to be enabled with the new version, and we're very excited for that. We are aiming towards the end of this year for that to become available, but we'll be making sure that it's really resilient and robust before we launch it. So again, if you're interested in being involved in any beta testing, please get in touch with us at elemental@aluminiumstewardship.org. Okay. While you're typing, I'm going to ask our Secretariat panel to now turn their cameras on and join us, and this will be a general Q&A opportunity to ask any practical questions about ASI kind of matters. We have most of our senior management on this panel, and they work across ASI's various work streams, so you can pop your questions into the Q&A box. We still have one from earlier, and so I'm going to put that through to you, Chris, to start. So is ASI going to revise its prerequisite standards for certification, taking CBAM into account?
Hey, folks. I'll take that question in two parts. The first bit is the part before the comma. And indeed, that is what we are doing as part of our standards revision process that we've kicked off, and we're already a couple of months into, and we can expect to see changes to the performance standard around greenhouse gases. I think a continued commitment to 1.5 degree alignment, but understanding, I think you said, Fiona, about this non-linear change that's going to happen. How do we cope with that? Well, one of the things I would say to the questioner is get involved. As that standard evolves, as the criteria evolve, we need your input, the input of folks out there all the way along the value chain, multiple groups of stakeholders, and there's lots of opportunities to do that. So the first thing is to go to the website perhaps and have a look at our revision hub. It's the first place to go to understand how you can have input. Taking CBAM into account, well, yeah, we do need to understand how regulation is evolving all around the world, and that's one of the avenues that's being explored as we revise the standard. But one thing I would say about CBAM is that it's probably closer linked to alignment with the EU ETS than it is around positive change related to the climate. I mean, our current pathways work includes all of the information that one might report through CBAM and more. So if you're doing ASI's greenhouse gas pathways and you're disclosing data according to ASI's method, you have the data required to report to CBAM. Now, specifically on how products flow into and out of jurisdictions, that is definitely something that we're being asked to get involved in more and more, product carbon footprint, etc. But yes, it will all be part of the standards revision. There's lots going on in there, so I encourage the questioner and others to get involved, whether it's through public consultation or through one of the other avenues through our website.
Very clear. Thank you, Chris. And don't forget, if you've got some questions, to pop them into that Q&A box. So building on this standards revision work that we've going on, Chelsea, what are some of the other structural changes that are being explored by the committee?
Hi, Fiona. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the question. So with the revision process that launched officially in March, already we are exploring a few structural changes in the performance standard. So the first is to start thinking about some type of differentiation or recognizing different performance levels within that standard. Again, without trying to make it too complicated, the aim here really is to first recognize companies that are performing sort of at a leading practice level, acknowledging that that can change over time. But second, and really important from a sectoral view, to be setting out better pathways for continuous improvement so that no matter where you are in a specific topic or thematic area, you're already aware of kind of how practices should evolve and what you're working towards. One of the second changes, which Fiona teed up earlier in the call, is to really strengthen the focus on materiality and relevance. So trying to pivot our very large and comprehensive standard to focus the most effort where those impacts are greatest, based on your company's activities, your position in the supply chain, or even where you operate. And again, that will be a challenge without introducing too much complexity, but it's an area that we're exploring. And maybe third to mention is that we are also looking hard at how we might be able to build some more outcome-based criteria or kind of impact-driven criteria into the standard, as well as maintaining that historic focus on management systems and process-based requirements. So do stay tuned and get involved for more input into that work.
That's great, Chelsea. Thank you. And Nat, we do have a question in the chat box around if it's possible to reduce the auditing person days that are required. Is it possible, I'm not sure, but not to audit? There's ISO standards 14,001 and 45,001 if an entity holds a valid certificate for these two management systems. Now, we do have a recognition process, don't we? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona, and thank you for the question. We do have that recognition, and through the process is identifying what certifications a certifying member has. And whilst it's not specific in the assurance manual, there's no minimum requirement or specific requirement around those environmental, operational and management system focus or the op health and safety. There is an expectation that there would be a less required from a level of effort and the amount of time if there is a recent ISO 14,001 or 45,001 audit report that an auditor on site can view and can verify the outcomes of that audit. But look, we would never be in a position to say that you wouldn't have to go through those relevant criterion under the performance standard, because I look at something like the ISO 45,001 and recognise those findings that auditors identify when they're doing their on-site observations, when they're talking with workers, when they're doing their walk through particular operational areas. There's always a new set of eyes to identify areas that potentially could be improved. So whilst there is no specific time saving, I would suggest that an audit team could look at the risks associated with it and pull back slightly on some of the times associated with their on-site auditing.
Thanks, Nat. And Janello, you had mentioned before about our flat roll product sector work, and where we're looking to understand the customer segments within that and what kind of needs they have, what do they sort of value perhaps from ASI's work. How can current members work with us on this?
Okay, thanks, Fiona. So members need to get us in a room with their customers and suppliers. That's really what we want. They can do this by either sponsoring roundtable events or co-hosting sessions with us. The roundtables will enable direct outreach to these customers or suppliers or brands. They'll also enable the customers to speak directly with ASI and help us educate them on the members' behalf, because we hear from members that, oh, we've been trying to talk to this supplier or this customer and they don't really understand what we're saying. Well, let ASI do the talking for you. We get the opportunity through the co-hosting or the roundtables to be able to let them know what is possible from a standards and industry perspective, because I think sometimes customers, suppliers, people who are not involved in ASI actually need that kind of education to know that maybe what they're asking for is not possible, or it could be possible from this direction. And it's also because ASI has a lot of deep expertise on supply chain specific knowledge. So it gives us an opportunity to bring that knowledge to your customers and your suppliers. The other thing that members could do, and I just realized I'm talking very fast and I'm sorry, members could also be more forthcoming with their customer pain points. So we can feed these into the standards, like Chelsea was saying, the standards revision where possible, because it's not everything that you say that we will be able to add to the standards, but at least we can understand what those pain points are and see how we can begin to enhance or continue to enhance ASI's position as a solution. So it's not the solution, but it's one of the many solutions out there. So all that to say, if there's any members on the call who are interested in working with us on the Flat Roll Products project, please let me know, and then we'll take it from there. So thank you.
Thanks, Janelle. Thanks for reminding me to speak slowly as well. Marika, what are some of the due diligence frameworks that ASI is working with? We saw that supply chain due diligence piece come up in certainly an area that people are interested in or that they see value from ASI's work. And how's this going to play out as we head into the standards revision?
Thank you very much, Fiona, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Yes, of course, this is a very important topic and front end of mind for a lot of people. So ASI, we support companies' due diligence in a number of ways. So, of course, through our standards and certification. And the current 2022 standards do include human rights and supply chain due diligence criteria already, following the UN guiding principles and also the OECD due diligence guidance. So regardless where you are in the supply chain, you already have to undertake that due diligence tailored to your specific context. And of course, we have also already been aligned with the OECD due diligence guidance for conflict affected and high risk areas to meet those LME responsible sourcing requirements. In addition, we provide practical learning and support that can help make due diligence implementation more effective, impactful, and equitable. And by publishing information through our assurance processes, companies also use that as part of complying with the regulation. So moving forward, as we're looking to the next version of standards, we're looking to incorporate and further align the performance standard with due diligence expectations from international frameworks, and in particular the CSDDD here in Europe, as well as aligning it further with the OECD due diligence guidance for responsible business conduct. At the same time, we're looking at the existing standard and seeing how we can reduce duplication and improve usability through potentially merging criteria that now sit in different parts of the standard and kind of combining it in more coherent criteria moving forward to make sure that it's a more integrated or integratable process. And then finally, we do want to maintain our alignment with the OECD due diligence guidance for conflict affected and high risk areas to meet the LME responsible sourcing requirements. So there probably won't be that much change in those areas because that's very important for our member companies as well. So beyond the standards and certification side, we also, of course, work in partnership with many organizations to make sure that we stay up to date on what's happening on the due diligence regulatory front, including with the European Aluminium, the ISEAL Alliance, and their government engagement and policy working group. And also we sit on the OECD multi-stakeholder steering group. And finally, we're also working with a number of downstream sector initiatives, particularly in the automotive sector, to such as the Responsible Supply Chain Initiative and Drive Sustainability, to see how we can also get recognized by them, further reducing duplication of efforts. So hopefully that will answer the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Marika. So I'm going to combine a bit of a question to Chris with one that's also come in. So we are exploring the potential for ASI claims in future perhaps to product carbon footprint or other types of claims. And so there's a specific question here about environmental product declarations, for example. Can they replace life cycle assessments? But more broadly, as we look at this expanding area of claims, Chris, what are some of the challenges and opportunities that you see?
Yeah, so this can EPD replace LCA reminds me of that comic strip that everyone always has, right? Where you have two folks and they say, we've got 12 standards, we need to harmonize this, let's build a new standard. And then the following year they say, we now have 13 standards. I mean, EPDs are important because they enable this comparability of similarly scoped products, but they're built on LCA data, and indeed LCA data is used for a multitude of things. So I think we need to be very careful that often we're using similar data sets, but for lots of different purposes, and some of the data scoped in very different ways. And understanding how ASI fits within that, understanding that there'll be people talking to regulators, whether it's through CBAM, they'll be talking to customers about comparability of products on the market or about understanding supply chains information. But what's ASI's role in that? What we're hearing, and we will be going out with some consultation on this, is that certain parts of the value chain want a couple of things. They want to trust that the data that the information they're getting from their suppliers is similar from the data from someone else. So they want comparability and trust. And I think that area of trust is where ASI has a role to play, given that we have this 10 years of experience with third-party verification, auditors, third-party auditors coming in and doing certification. So we have something to offer there, but EPDs and other things are just claims, really. They are claims about environmental or social or other qualities embedded in a product. And by embedded, I mean kind of allocated to those products. And so we will be exploring what kind of claims folk want to make, supported by ASI, whether it's through the performance standard, through the chain of custody standard, or through other mechanisms like, I don't know, information flow through the system, carbon footprint type data. So that's something definitely that we're going to be exploring. But as I say, these use cases are heterogeneous. There are many, many of them. Also, they need to be resourced. So we kind of have to understand what resourcing is available and folks are willing to, the value people are willing to put on some of those claims being made. And right now, it's not entirely clear around product carbon footprint exactly the kinds of claims entities might want to make on the one hand, and secondly, what regulation will allow, because increasing pushback against greenwashing means that some of the claims that people may want to make really just won't be possible in the regulatory environment in the future. So that is part of our thinking as well. Indeed, we have a chain of custody and claims working group that has recently met for its first meeting, and we'll have a couple more later this year, and that will feed into the public consultation process as well as we move through this year too. But yeah, increasingly folks say they want to have trust in the information at hand, and they want to be able to say when they have two buckets of information that they're scoped the same. And that's really, I think, the role that we have to play to build that trust in the data that is delivered, particularly to downstream customers, although it's not only that direction.
And the common methods aspect, I think, the likes of the comparability side.
Look, absolutely. The method on the one hand, the kind of bits of paper that one uses to measure themselves against, but also the implementation of that and the verification of that too, which in it through our third-party assurance, through our assurance process, assurance framework, builds that trust as well. In terms of that commonality of method, there is certainly what's the word? There are differing views, right? So there is not a right answer here. There is going to be a kind of a political negotiated outcome for some of these things. And there, again, I think that's a role that ASI can play, given that we have full value chain coverage, right? We're able to bring lots of different voices and perspectives together in determining these kinds of methods, but they're not simple to deliver. But they do need people to speak, right? So again, it's another call for people to get involved in these conversations, difficult though they might be.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And Wayne, I will ask you a quick question at the end. We did touch earlier on the increase, a small membership fee increase in 2026, and that's 2 years since we had the last one. How will this increase support of ASI strategy and member programs?
Thank you, Fiona. Yeah, look, it has been discussed by speakers already tonight in many ways. We are rolling out a continuing ASI strategy, and we're continuing to provide a high level of member support. And we have to maintain a level of financial viability for the business in order to do so. If it was mentioned earlier, if you go back into history, you do find that ASI did have a history of surpluses, 2023, 24, and again in our budget year 2025. We actually are going through a period where we're having deficits. So we're using the cumulative build-up of historical member fees, and we're now using those to invest in the continuing development of capability in our Secretariat and also our provision of member services. So the reason we don't take lightly the idea that we need to consider, and the board will be in the course of June considering the requirement for a fee increase effective from January 2026. But it's taken with a lot of seriousness. But the underlying requirement is that ASI does maintain a financial viability in its operations, and that we ensure by doing so that we can continue to roll out all of the member services that have been discussed and presented tonight through the AGM to the broad membership base.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks. So we're going to move to the last Slido that we have now, and sort of if everyone reflects on the questions that we've had during the session, both to the Secretariat and to the board, we have a wide variety of topics that we're looking to address and that we try to wrap our arms around through the various work that we do. So we're really interested to hear from you what sort of topics you want to hear more about from us. Now, I know that not everyone can access the Slido, so if you're unable to enter it into the Slido thing, please send us an email at info@aluminiumstewardship.org and let us know if there's any topics that you'd like to hear about. That could be webinars, it could be additional learning areas, it could be anything at all. So, the new context. So I assume that means the kind of broader landscape and the complexity of the environment that we're working in. But yes, we can certainly look to have some bigger picture ones coming up. Greenhouse gas benchmarking of interest, equivalence with other standards. Yes, there's certainly been work on that in some of the harmonisation and standards benchmarking working group that we used to have, but looking at how their different programs are going forward is certainly something that we can consider too. Successes in decarbonisation, human rights, supply chain map, beyond certification projects. We've had a number of those earlier this year, and I know we'll have more to tell. Mark Annandale, our Director of Research and IPAF advisor, is currently in Guinea working on one of those projects that I mentioned before. So no doubt we'll be sharing that in future too. Ooh, it's got a double vote. Thumbs up for Mark. And impact assessment from ASI activities, looking at other sectors. I guess FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, would be one of those there. Some of the work on scrap, we've had a few of those recently, and I know there's more to tell on that too as well. Great. So keep those coming in, and of course, at any time, get in touch with us with any ideas or requests, and of course, resources that you might have to share with us. So a big thanks to the Secretariat panel for the discussion that we've just had. And I'm going to hand back to you, Sasha, as our chair to wrap up and close the AGM for us.
Thank you very much, Fiona. First of all, I just wanted to apologize to the Chinese participants who weren't able to use Slido during the AGM. As mentioned, we will follow up with you after to make sure that we're getting your feedback to include in the analysis. In this uncertain global economic environment, clearly we're seeing risks, but there's also opportunities opening up to drive transformative change. So it's an exciting time for a standards revision. I'd also like to come back to this 10 years of ASI and congratulate all those pioneers with the vision to come together to drive sectoral change. And thanks to everyone else for bringing new energy, ideas, and insights as we grow and evolve, working through this critical revision process underway. I have a few thank yous as well before wrapping up. First of all, thanks to Fiona and the Secretariat for all the work that goes into planning this AGM and all the work that you do every day to strengthen ASI and create value for members. Thank you very much to our translators. This is not an easy thing to do, especially when we tend to speak quickly. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank my fellow board members as well, and thank all the people involved in our various governance mechanisms, the Standards Committee members, working group members, and IPAF members. The formal business of this AGM is now complete. I thank you all very much for attending today and declare the AGM closed.